change is taking place. Angie, welcome.
I got a few minutes to walk around and look around, and I really felt a lot of presence of good student voice and student choice out there, and seeing some of the cool things that are posted and some of the events and activities that are going on. So thanks for inviting me down here. I wanted to, just welcome you. Today is just going to be starting the journey about some cultural competency, and we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more about what that looks like for you, what that looks like for your school. But keep in mind as we go through this, I respect that everyone in this room is at a different place when we start this conversation, much like a lot of the things that we go through. But I also want you to know that as we look at cultural competency and we look at it as a process or a journey, that it takes time to develop this, and it always is good to keep coming back to the beginning about who we are and our own personal culture. So as we continue this, and as you move forward after this, maybe this conversation or these conversations that we have today will springboard some additional momentum for you to continue to move forward. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our purpose today, is to start that journey of self-reflection, define race, ethnicity, and culture. That'll kind of help us level the playing field, so we're all kind of coming at it from the same understanding. We'll talk a little bit about cultural sensitivity, some personal bias, and then have some time to kind of share a little bit about ourselves with each other, and kind of just do a little bit more of an understanding and a reflection of who we are and where we came from. First, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my own cultural journey. I grew up in a town much like Rushford, a town of 700 people in southwestern Wisconsin. There were more cows in my town than there were people. You might be able to understand that a little bit. And I grew up on a farm and one of 4 daughters. So for us, a gender stereotype did not happen. It didn't matter if you were a female or a male, there were still chores to do. You still had to drive the tractor, you still had to mow the hay. It didn't matter if the cows got out, you still had to chase them down, even though they were 300 times the weight of you. So that, when I think about my cultural journey, I wasn't even exposed to anyone in my limited knowledge of anyone from a different culture or a different race in my hometown until I got to college. And then, boy oh boy, I started dating someone from another race, and my parents had a heyday about it, because this was unheard of. We didn't do this. Not only were there more cows in my hometown, there weren't even any stop signs on my main street. So that, we're talking pretty small, closed-minded, not really aware or exposed to a lot of American culture in the sense that we typically would understand it. So, I think about that, and I think about how, as we continue to be asked to do different things and to be accepting of more things and understanding more things, I want you to keep in mind that just because we accept how people are, who people are, where they come from, it's not up to us to approve it or not. Okay, so as I think about my own journey, and I think about how we continue to work with staff, and we continue to work with parents, and we work with everyone about understanding ourselves, but also recognizing that everyone else comes from their journey too. So in Rochester, where I work as a behavior specialist at an elementary school, which I've done for about 20 years, in addition to being a school social worker and a school counselor, we have done some pretty extensive training in the last 5 years about cultural competency. We have made a really concerned effort to do a lot of staff development around this topic, really kind of bring some awareness and information and some practices into place to help us meet our students' needs a little bit more. And I'll tell you a little bit about that and a little bit about why that's important in a little bit. But for now, I want to start you out with a little activity, okay? Just want you to match up with a partner, somebody near you, and every time you hold your partner's thumb for 3 seconds, you get a point. And just keep count. And we'll do this for 1 minute. Okay? So I'm just going to hold your partner's thumb for a minute. Keep track. So it's kind of like thumbs, kind of like you're doing thumb, where you're kind of thumb, and you just hold each other's thumb down a little bit. If you hold it for 3. Okay? All right, 1 minute. Okay, and I'm not going to point anybody out, but I saw some really nice, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I mean, very nice, very nice. And then I saw some other people who almost needed to stand up to get the edge up. And then they might have won a point and then had a little fist pump and then they went back at it. Let's set the clock. Wait, we got 5 more seconds. Come on. Okay? So, oftentimes when we think of culture, we think about the way people look or the different colors or different ways people dress. But I want to dig down into this and ask you, did this become competitive in your group? Now there was a nice balance. There was a nice balance in this room. Last week I was in La Crescent Hoka and almost everyone was competitive. They were going to it. And it was, the voice, the volume in the room got nice and loud and everybody was kind of, you could see them really going at it. But what does this tell us? I didn't say this was a competition. I didn't say that we were going to win anything or we should really, I said just keep count, keep track. But immediately some of us, based on how we were raised or our experiences about a competitive nature, immediately thought that this was a competition. Right? So what does that tell us about our culture? For those of you who maybe were a little bit more patient and just taking turns and everybody had a fair chance, right? Right? Okay, no problem. But what does it tell us then also about those people who were trying to get more points and really trying to go at it? What else? Other comments?
And you did well. Yes.
Okay. So when we think about culture, we think about deeper things regarding some of our beliefs, some of our attitudes, some of our experiences that have resulted in it. And I attribute a lot of my determination and my dedication to things about how I was raised on the farm. Is that there was no, you just had to do it. You had to work. And it didn't matter if you were hurt, it didn't matter if you were injured, it still needed to be done. I was a high school and college athlete, and I remember my dad driving down the driveway with his boots on, getting out of the tractor and saying, "You're not working hard enough. Your footwork is too fast," or "pump fake more on your back step, or on your dribble, or on your shot." But he would say, "Somebody out there is practicing harder than you are, and when you meet them, they will beat you." And that was the kind of mentality that we grew up in, the culture that my sisters and I grew up in. So when we think about all of those little nuances, it oftentimes we don't take the time to purposefully explore those a little bit and think about those. But we're going to do that today. So how easy or how difficult was that to recognize? Unless you're pretty close to the neighbor that you're with and you know that about them, you might not have known that they were that competitive. Maybe you're looking around like, oh, now. But now that might give you some insight into somebody on your staff that is super competitive. And when I need something done, or when we're going to attack something, I want that person on my corner. Or if you have somebody who's more community-based, you have somebody who's more neutral, or what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit maybe more communal. Right? That this is for everyone, that there's no competition, that we're all in this together, and we're just going to do it so it's fair and equal. And those are also people who have strengths that you want on your team when you're looking at different things to do regarding student needs and achievement. Okay? All right. So read the yellow with me, if you can. I feel like I'm kind of in here, way over here. Read the yellow with me as I read through. We all have unconscious bias. It's there. No, there's no sugarcoating it. It's all there, and it's not right or wrong, and it just is. Cultural competence in teachers is directly related to achievement. There is more and more research coming out about this. And how, it's not just because of our black and brown kids. It's not just because of kids who come from different socioeconomic status. Cultural competence is best for all kids. And as you continue to explore this and you start on this journey, you'll find some bonus things. Stereotype threat has a direct impact on achievement for students from all identity groups. And stereotypes new buzzword that's coming out, but it's really about what students perceive from the adults in their life. Do they perceive that regardless of who they are, they have some kind of a perceived threat based on something about them? And it's really an interesting thing because we often talk about, well, I know I have good relationships with my students, but do we ever ask the students if they think they have good relationships with us? And a lot of this stereotype threat is impacting some of those relationships and that achievement. And finally, morally and ethically, this is just right. It's the right thing to do. Now, if all of that doesn't persuade you into why we're doing this, the state now requires you have to be here. So there. So it's all the warm and fuzzies, and then it's like, no, sorry, you have to do it. All right. So a part of this journey includes cultural sensitivity. All right. Being aware that a lot of those differences are out there, a lot of those differences, and they're not any. There should be no value based on those. That they're just there. And not only when we think about ourselves and our own cultural journey, but we also think and have to recognize what other people are going through in their own cultural journey. Okay? So, again, it's not negative. I don't have to accept or approve. I don't have, excuse me, let me rephrase that. I don't have to approve of what other people have gone through or what they've done or their beliefs, but I do have to accept it as their own. Just like I would ask them to accept me as my own, and my cultural beliefs, and my beliefs, my attitudes, my perceptions about those things too. And this is a hard thing to do. And some of you may be very strong at this, and some of you may be just starting to get your feet wet here, but it is, and it's a process, and it's a journey, and that's okay. I also ask you as we continue to go through today is that you become comfortable with discomfort. The only way we make progress in this kind of work is if we really truly try to be comfortable with discomfort. And some of the things, one of the activities we do a bit later may stimulate some of that discomfort, and that's okay. But I want to put that out there right now. Okay? All right. Just so we can get started on kind of leveling that playing field, oftentimes there is some confusion, and I hear that from staff. Race, ethnicity, culture, it's all the same. Well, in order for us to kind of start at the same place, we're going to talk just briefly about these definitions. So race is typically, that's a federal category, and you know every time that you fill out some form or something, it has you check your race. And those are just simply categories that are identified based on physical characteristics. So I would be a white or a Caucasian based on my skin color. And those are those others, you know, African American, Hispanic, Middle Eastern. Those kinds of things are more of those typical races. I think there's 7 federal identifications for race. If we look at ethnicity, then we talk about certain characteristics that are passed on. So maybe it's more of a Norwegian ethnicity, or maybe it's more of a, you know, I think about different things where you think about your history and where you've come from and your family as a whole, right? Some of those things are more of my ethnic culture. But really where we get into a deeper understanding of culture is all of these nuances, all of these little things that are really specific more to maybe my geographic area, or my socioeconomic status, or maybe my age, maybe my gender identity. All of those things are a little bit more specific to a smaller group of people. So if race is a big category, then we kind of get down into this ethnicity, and then culture is really where you get a little bit more individualized in people's understandings and beliefs, if that makes sense. Any questions about that? Okay. It's kind of a good analogy, and when I found this picture, I thought it'd be fun. It kind of gives a great idea and understanding of that culture embraces a lot of things. So underneath this cultural umbrella, all of these things kind of fit in. So you might see this picture, or you might see one like this. And this is by Dr. Shraki Holly, and I might reference him a little bit more, but a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you is also information that he shared with us at Rochester Public Schools. And he is certainly proud to have his name dropped here, knowing that he is that more people are furthering the work that he started. He's the executive director of the Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning Center in California. So he this is his life's work and his huge passion. So he is a great resource, has written several books, co-authored several books about this journey. So he talks about rings of culture as being all of the different things that can influence your behaviors, your attitudes, all of the different ways that you have grown into your beliefs. And again, none of which are bad, none of which should be placed in any value, but are certainly unique to you. So on your handout, go ahead and just take a minute to kind of identify, so an age culture example would be maybe you're in that 40 to 45 age range of culture. Okay, maybe some of you, or you can lie a little if you want to. So just take a minute to kind of really reflect on where you are in those cultural rings. Okay.
This one is okay, yeah, so I as you were kind of figuring this out and talking to your neighbor a little bit, were there any things that came up that you were kind of confused about? That's a legit area of confusion, because we don't often dig into this a little bit. Comment. Thank you.
So I'm sitting here with my cooperating teacher, and she looks at me and goes, "What is orientation?" I think it's something that I'm probably more familiar with, just being my age, so it was just kind of funny.
Absolutely. So,
straight, bye.
right. But that's perfect, and that's a perfect example of age culture, right? If you're younger, you probably have not really talked or heard or even experienced much about sexual orientation culture, right? So for this one, you might not even know what that is, and fair enough, because if you're older or just less exposed to that, or it's not even a part of your vocabulary, you wouldn't know that. But that's a great example of the difference in age culture too, as you brought up. Other comments? And the more rings of culture that you draw from, the more diverse your experience is. If you went to go find somebody in this room that met every single one of your same rings, you would find out that you also have, despite having many things in common, you would have many things that are uncommon. Based on that deep, deep culture of things that how you were raised, the behavior, the attitudes, the beliefs, all of that kind of thing. That even though we see that we have similarities, we are still very different. Okay, looking around the room, we've got probably 99% of us would associate with a white ethnic culture. But every single one of us has, based on all of the other circles, would have different stories to share. Okay? All right. So here's where we get to dig a little deeper. Okay? Most of us When we think about different cultures, we think about how we often are exposed to things. Through movies, through books, maybe we go to a Native American powwow, maybe we've hosted a Native American night or a Somali night, or maybe we've had a Hispanic food night or something like that. And that's all great initial exposure. And that's how we start the journey, by becoming a little more comfortable with those pieces of things, right? Things that make us a little more comfortable just by exposure. Maybe you've gone to a different church with a relative or a friend. Just that exposure helps you on your journey of understanding cultural differences. The thing is that a lot of times we see all of that, and we think and it's great, and we can respect that. But this is where we get to know our students and our colleagues and our families even better. So if your students look like you, then you might think, well, I understand their family. But truly, if you start looking at this list of all of these deeper cultural things, these are the things where when we have students who for some reason aren't doing their job, following directions, aren't coming to class, why is it that they're not? And what is in their belief system that says that? Maybe their respect for home and chores trumps their respect for school. Maybe some of these beliefs about concept of cleanliness or notions of adolescence or even group decision, I can't decide until I talk to my family. Because in their culture, that's exactly how it is. It's all these unspoken rules that we can't see and that we don't know until we really truly get to know our families. Okay? So an example that I'd like you to do, okay, is you're going to use your iceberg handout. And I want you to just choose one item under the water. Some of that deep emotional, cultural piece, much like my family and my work ethic. And then this is a discussion protocol that Dr. Holly teaches about how to engage students on different levels. And it's called face-to-face, which means that you look at somebody, once you have your content, you look at somebody across the room, make eye contact with them, give them a thumbs up, and now that's your silent appointment. So now I'm going to meet up with a person that I made eye contact with. I'm going to get up and move around. And I'm going to share with them, give one, get one. I'm going to give them the example that I chose on my iceberg, and they're going to give me one. Okay? Each person will get to share for a minute, and then I'll have you switch and do another face-to-face silent appointment with someone else and go and share with them. Okay? Any questions about this before we get started? So find something underneath the iceberg and make eye contact. Get up and move around with somebody. Give them a thumbs up.
Alright, I say return to, you say my seat. Return to. Alright, thank you. So, what was this experience like for you? Fun. Fun. Tell us a little more, please.
We picked the same, whatever, under the water thing. We picked the same.
Okay, so you and your first partner both picked the same one. Do you mind me asking what it was?
What was it then?
I don't remember.
Being on time.
Oh, for a good time. Sure, anybody else choose that one? Yeah, pretty common. And did you, once you started talking about it, did you have the same concept of
Yes,
time? The
we
same-
did.
You did, isn't that fun?
We had the right one.
Now, I know Andy just talked about choices, but, you know, choosing it. How about other comments? Thank you.
We talked about concept of food, and so it was interesting to see like similarities that we had and differences of how our families we cook and all that.
Oh, awesome. Good. Did anything come up about comfort food and when you ate or when you didn't eat?
Just like homemade versus boxed food kind of thing.
Sure.
So both our families did a lot of homemade food, and like for her family, the boxed stuff was like a rare occasion, and it was the fun part of it.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Other comments? How many of you felt like this experience really helped you kind of think about some of those things that you never really purposely gave any thought to? And all of those things, and imagine if you could really dig down and take, half an hour to look at 3, 4, 5, 6 of these things. How important they are and how important they become to us today. I think about some of those and I think about, oh, my poor kids, because I'm saying the same things to my kids that my mom said to me about the concept of time, right? Can't be late, hurry up, get your... But I think about how those things get ingrained in us, and through no fault of our own, it's just how we are. Which is really kind of cool when we think about meeting the different needs of our students. And oftentimes we don't know what they come in with. And we don't know what they're bringing to the table, and we don't understand those deep emotional connections and cultures that they have within their own homes. All right? So this is a journey, this culture of competency. We talk, in Rochester we've been doing this work for about 5 years, and we are still doing this work. And it's because we always have to keep, it's a fluid process. Today we're just going to talk a little bit about this, our own self-awareness, and exploring some of that ourselves. And then we'll talk just real briefly about touching on this, about what other people's cultures look like. And we're referencing that. So as you think about not only just your own cultural self, but think about, what, other people are like this too. They have all of these different influences that are making an impact on who they are and what they believe today and how they act. Okay, so here's where you need your device. Does everybody have some kind of an electronic device? When we get to this activity, I'm going to ask you to share. I'll have you log on to our website. But I want you to be thinking about stereotypes, prejudice, or biases you may have based on experience. Maybe you have heard or read about, or you just perceived from media. All of those things are okay. You'll have an opportunity to reply 3 times for each cultural group that I put on the screen. You can do it in silence, you don't have to, but your answers will be shown live through a website called Mentimeter. If you haven't heard of Mentimeter, it is, anybody hear that? Okay, great. Well, it's an easy to use tool in your Whoops, hold on, I'm gonna reset my results so you don't see. So you don't. All right. So it is, go ahead to log on to menti.com, which is shown up here, and then use this code. Okay? So for those of you who want an easy-to-use resource in the classroom to kind of gauge student voice, this website is free for educators to create up to 3 slides. And it gives you lots of different options for quizzing students, taking a poll, giving them options. It's kind of like, I think my kids said it's kind of like something that they use at school, now I can't even remember. But I found it and it really works really well. And you'll see as we go, the one that we're going to use is called just a scrolling response. So what you'll do is once you're on this website and you've punched in the code, you're going to just type in up to 3 answers regarding the elderly culture. Your thoughts, your stereotypes, your biases, anything that you think of that relates to elderly culture. And as soon as you start typing, your answers will appear live on the screen just as a scroll. Okay, so go ahead, dig deep into your thoughts, feelings. Pause that for a second. Did you notice that some of these are positive and negative? If you associate in this group, how do reading some of those feel for you? You're welcome to share, or you can just think about that. Okay? And then I think about, regardless of how these are positive or negative to us by placing value on them, they're real in the sense that these are people's perceptions, right, based on their experiences. And even though we look at them and we do say, oh, they're positive, they're negative, the goal of cultural competency is to just look at them and use them for understanding and for awareness. Okay, so it doesn't negate our experiences. It doesn't mean that everything you've experienced, positive or negative, is not worth exploring, but it's a matter of just being aware. Okay? All right. Let's go on to the next one. We'll do this with several culture groups. Okay? Yeah. Well, it's How about this next one?
do that way.
Yeah, I think you're behind. We did that one. You guys do this one.
So just take a couple minutes to take a look at these reflection questions. Okay? Think about them for yourself. When you're ready, you can start to just maybe have a conversation with the person next to you about some of these questions. About that, what that was like. Especially if you associated with some of those groups or one of those groups and how that impacted you. And then also about how that could help move you forward.
I think it goes back to your, this color wheel you showed at the start, that's one ring of the culture, it's hard, because not everybody is identified by that one ring, it's just a small part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Other thoughts?
You're just told us to write stereotype. It doesn't necessarily mean that what a person wrote is what they believe.
Very good. That too.
So just because somebody put it up there doesn't mean that this group believes that about them.
Absolutely. And a lot of the things, and I don't know if you noticed this, and maybe I was a little bit more aware because of the number of times I've taught this, but Oftentimes when we start out with elderly and teenagers, those are easy for us to say all sorts of things about because they're pretty generically represented, right? But then when we dig a little bit deeper into more specific categories, specific races or nationalities or even gender orientation, the responses come a little slower and they tend to be more positive. People tend to hesitate, and maybe hesitate or maybe not, about things that they share just based on what they've experienced or what they've gleaned from media. And media is a huge influencer in the way that we perceive different things, in the way that we are influenced by how we should interact or should not interact with other people. So as I watch some of those answers come up, you know, for teenager and elderly, I mean, 99% of the time, there's a lot of slow drivers and there's a lot of stinky, sassy kids, right? But oftentimes, I'm always impressed with the number of compliments that I see towards other cultures. And oftentimes, a lot of the comments that you made about how people are misrepresented, that's exactly right. And so until we really start to figure out how do we get to know everyone at those cultural levels, those deep cultural levels, we don't truly understand them. Then we can learn to have some more of that sensitivity. Any other thoughts or comments? All right. I'd like to share a little video based on that exact thing. It's about recognizing that there are differences at deeper levels, and just because you're in one ring of culture doesn't mean that everybody in that culture has that same characteristic or that same identity. This is taken, I'm going to link it to the video, but it was an article in the Washington Post. And if you want to pull it up, it's a pretty powerful video about an activity that a teacher did in her classroom and how it ended up going viral. Can you hear that? See that okay? Do I have my volume?
The lie. Muslims are terrorists.
Black boys are bad.
Girls are not athletic. Latinos can't speak English well.
Chechens are a bad influence on others. Africans aren't smart.
Asians can't play sports.
All black people are thieves.
People from Mexico bring nothing good.
I'm too pretty to be Togolese.
The lie. All white people are racist. The truth. I'm white and I'm not racist. I care for people who are of another race.
I may have brown skin, but I'm the same as you. If you test me, I will succeed. And you underestimate me for the color of my skin, I'm tired of the hurtful words.
Latinos like me can speak English well. They are learning, doing their best. Have you learned a second language? It's hard, and yet people yell at Latinos because they don't understand what they're saying.
Why? Why do they say that? Why do they? What did I ever do to you to make you judge me and say that? You should know, not all Muslims are terrorists.
But you push me down just to pull yourself up. You use lies to make me feel like that's what I really am. Like I really am a thief. But I know I'm not a thief because I still am just like you.
So you shouldn't judge me or people like me. So why are you judging them? You don't know them. So stop the lies. Don't let the others brainwash you.
Those negative words are a noisy room full of rumors. I just want to cover my ears and just forget.
What is the truth? I know the truth. The truth that lies in my heart. The truth about black boys. I am black. This is me. The lie about black boys that I don't believe in. And I know it's not the truth. Because the truth that is real is my truth.
Girls can definitely be athletic. I am Asian. I play soccer.
I can be pretty and be Togolese. Beautiful people come from all over the world.
I am Latino, and I can speak English.
I'm not a thief. I've never stolen anything.
I'm not a terrorist, so think again.
I am black. I am not aggressive. I would not harm anyone.
Everybody deserves equal rights. Everybody deserves respect for who they are. Racist people don't believe these things. I am not one. I am you.
Thoughts on that? Pretty powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
every time I watch it, I still get choked up a little bit. But you think about how valuable and how powerful our words are, whether we know or not know. But again, part of this journey is just being aware and recognizing that we come from a spot where we might be influenced by something, and we might not even purposefully be trying to influence others. But again, everybody's impacted by those thoughts, and it can be really powerful, and it can be uncomfortable. And how do we move forward then, as a group, as a district, to think about how can we get to know people even better? So, again, another discussion protocol, or actually an interaction protocol from Dr. Holly's work is called the moment of silence. Anytime you have something that is a sensitive topic that you're talking about in class, one of his strategies is to include a moment for just some processing time. So just after a video like that, just again, some reflection time about me, about what I've heard about that, and if you choose to talk about it afterwards, you may go ahead and do that with your neighbor. Any comments or thoughts that you're comfortable sharing about this?
We had the thought over here, when does it start, like, it seems like young kids are really accepting of everyone and everything and don't see it, and, I mean, we see it here, we're so white, and we have some black students coming to our school, and they are just like, boom, and they love them, and it's great. When does that switch happen? Like, is it a middle school, when do you start to see those differences?
Right.
If you're not taught it early.
Right. No, I totally agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of my first years as a school counselor about 20 years ago, I had to go into kindergarten classrooms and teach about differences. And I remember talking to kids about white and black and how that was different, and they looked at me like I was crazy, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm teaching them that this is different. Like that totally goes against everything that we know now. So I agree. And does anybody have any input on that? Any thoughts that when does that change? Because you do see younger kids. I mean, color knows no boundaries for little kids. They don't care if you're poor or you're rich or you're a friend like me. So what are some thoughts on that?
Back to your family and how you were growing up. Sometimes I see it more in the older culture having more biases than us younger generation growing up now. Because there's so many differences we just get used to.
Right. Just that progression of exposure. Right. Other thoughts?
Maybe parents step in, and say, oh, you're hanging out with him or her, or you know that they're this, or their parents are that.
Right? We dig deeper into those family beliefs, right? And then kids are influenced by the beliefs of their family. Absolutely.
I have to mention this because I kind of chuckle because for the elementary teachers, we just said the idea of acceptance and stuff like that. But as a high school social studies teacher, I'm teaching a liberal agenda if I'm going ahead and trying to teach acceptance and openness like this. So it is 180 degrees difference to the point where I've got some sneaky agenda if I'm trying to do the same thing that the younger teachers or younger age teachers are doing too. And I don't know as parents.
Right.
Even the term multiculturalism has taken a bad
Yeah.
thing lately where it was the thing we were all shooting for, all of a sudden now it's a bad thing. You hear that in the media a lot.
Right. Other restrictions influence you, right? Whether you believe in them or not. Certain things that you're required to do or required not to do. Prevented. Absolutely. I don't think there's any, like, a concrete timeline. But again, I think it's that exposure and having just that response. And we think a little bit later, we talk about how does our behavior impact our cultural beliefs and the way that we respond to other people and the way we respond to comments. Do we just let comments go, or do we say something to try to help further that thought and that idea without being too liberal or without being, within a culture of acceptance? And that's the challenge, I think, of why this work is so hard to move forward. And there's, in many schools that I talk to about this, there's a sense of urgency that we need to do something. We need to change this. And that's the hard part too, because we've got people who are up there pumping their fists and they're ready to go, and they feel that momentum. And despite knowing that it's a sense of urgency, the transformation takes so long. Because we're not just talking about being able to change something overnight. We're talking about ingrained beliefs that people have had for years. And I think about that a little bit later. We'll watch a video about the perception of black people and how people with colored skin perceive and why they think and feel and act the way they do based on their historical culture. So again, it's not just what, as white people, what we are feeling, but it's what those oppressed people are also feeling back. So it's a huge system of change, but as you continue to have these conversations, to think about this, and just bring awareness to that process, that already starts to impact the change. So this is a great step forward, and possibly it's a springboard to continue some of those thoughts and feelings and those actions. I'd like to bring up this little story about being quick to judge, and it kind of goes right into what you were saying, is that Harvey McKay is a journalist, and he had an article just last month in the Post-Bulletin, and as I was prepping through some of these slides and I saw this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. He tells a story about a mom who's got this beautiful little girl, and she's got 2 apples in her hands, and the mom says, oh honey, can I have one of those apples? And the little girl looks at the apples and she takes a bite of one, and she takes a bite of the other, and the mom's like, oh my gosh, did I raise an ungrateful, selfish child? I can't believe she just did that, oh my gosh. And then the little girl goes, here you go mommy, this one's sweeter. Oh, right? I know! And his whole article, if you care to reference it online, he's got several examples of this and how as a society we are quick to judge because our impulses is to be defensive or to just protect ourselves and our own culture and to stand up for what we believe in. But when we also try to take into account those other considerations and those other cultures, that we can start to make this a change. All right, so if those who identify as female will say the green with me, and those male, the blue, let's read out loud. Our experiences and cultural background play a huge role for how and why we think and act. So our culture impacts our behavior, and we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that not only in ourselves, but our students, our families. So since ingrained labels can impact our abilities as educators,
it's important to be aware of our own biases, stereotypes, and prejudices,
and start to recognize those of others. Okay. So this choral read, identifying different groups to read out, is another strategy for increasing engagement from Dr. Holly's work about allowing students who, the idea behind this is for some students who are not as strong readers, have the support of the group in reading out loud. And then you can, again, increase engagement by identifying different groups. So some teachers I've seen use this strategy to say, all right, those of you who have on green, read green. Those of you who have on blue, read blue. So a different way to engage students in some of the content in your lessons. Here's that video about recognizing cultural backgrounds from others and how their behavior is impacted by what they perceive as well.
Dove gives you fashion-ready underarms, so you can wear anything.
We'll have fashion-ready underarms.
Enjoy 48-hour protection.
I mean, look at the multicultural examples in there, right?
It's something that I don't usually talk about because I'm afraid that I'm making people uncomfortable. It's something that affects me in almost every aspect of life.
There's something about having dark skin on a woman's body that shapes the way she moves through the world. There's something about having darker skin on a male body that shapes the way in which he moves through the world. It has real life stakes.
From what I've seen growing up, dark skin equates to being poor, dirty, ratchet.
They tend to be the bad guys in Tyler Perry movies, straight from the border.
That doesn't even make any sense. I'm not deemed as beautiful, therefore I am not beautiful. And those two are not really mutually exclusive.
Could it be that something as early as colonization or slavery is primarily responsible for our beauty standards today? We're talking about who works in the field and who works in the house. We're also talking about rape, the rape of slaves to produce people who are known as mulattoes or mixed race. These standards of beauty travel. Eurocentric standards of beauty travel.
In the Dominican society and our culture, they have a phrase that's like mejorando la raza, advancing the Dominican population and making sure we're going into how they say the better. If you're lighter, you're bettering the race and you're bettering the island versus if you're just being you.
I would get called the blackness. One joke that really stuck with me was like, oh, Edgar's so black that when he leaves a car, the check engine light turns on. That was a reference to my skin being as dark as oil. I felt ugly being of a darker skin tone. So I tried to gel my hair, or I started listening to skater punk music. So I tried culturally to lighten myself, if that makes sense.
I went on a trip to Korea with my mom. Some woman walked up to my mom and she asked, "Why is your daughter so dark?" In Korea, you have to be pale, and I almost felt like a foreigner and not so much Korean anymore. When we turn off the lights, they say, "Oh, Sloan, where did you go?" Or, "Oh, you're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl." Are you saying that my race and just the fact that I am black, is that not attractive in general?
I remembered one time that I wanted to be an angel in a parade. At that time, they were like kind of racist, you know, they didn't like black people to be angels. And my mommy got kind of freaked out. She was going like, "Please don't, you cannot be an angel because they're gonna laugh at you." I said, "But mommy, I am an angel." And finally, I was an angel. And I was the only black angel walking in the street. And my mommy was so proud about it, and I was proud too.
My mom started buying me a cream called Fair and Lovely. I was in 3rd grade when I started using bleaching creams. And the whole general idea was, if I'm lighter, I'll have a better life. I'll find somebody that's gonna love me. There would still be light and dark patches on my body and my face. It's painful, it would hurt, and I started breaking out in like bad rashes. And no one said anything. I had to stop it myself.
How do we fix this? We think critically about colorism. We think about where it began and where it begins and ends with us.
I think change starts with providing more diversity. You know, providing more examples of people that look like you.
If you look at telenovelas, they usually cast the dark-skinned person as the villain. And if you never met a Latino before, you're gonna somewhat think that.
So in Japanese media, I honestly don't think I've ever seen a darker-skinned female. I feel it would be nice to see a change.
It needs to start within our own culture, where we can't have Will Smith filling in every slot for Black people. Giving dark-skinned people roles that are not only supporting roles, but leading roles.
I mean, a legit badass 007 Latino James Bond, that'd be pretty dope. I'm just saying.
I give a message to someone like me.
Who's kind of looking at himself and feeling insecure.
Just know, baby, you're beautiful.
Believe in yourself.
Just be you.
You are perfect just the way you are. That's something that no one has ever told me.
And your skin color is a gift. It's never been a blemish or a problem.
When you grow up and you look in the mirror and you're proud of who you are, it will make sense and all the other voices will go away. And all that's going to be left is you.
That ties in a lot of what you were saying already, right? About how do we make the change? How do we move forward? A lot of it is just thinking about that. How many times do we tell students that they are perfect, that they are fabulous, that they have, and those relations that you continue to cultivate with them. I love, you know, I don't know, did anybody watch the Oscars a couple weeks ago? Okay, that, if you didn't, and if you haven't, I'm not a huge movie person, but I like to just watch them for their gowns and stuff. But there are tons of movies out there right now that are really playing into this. I remember when Black Panther first came out, and about how it was really the first Black superhero, and how there was a lot of media coverage about this, and how we're really empowering people from other cultures to really know that they can be successful. So it's funny how when we hear from that video about how culture and even their own families have impacted their beliefs about themselves. And so I really liked how the one gentleman said, you know what, it needs to start within our own culture, which we all have to think about that, is that it all has to start within our own culture. And if we all had that thought, we can continue to be aware of that cultural sensitivity. Okay? Other thoughts on that video?
I thought it was ironic that people of color feel like they need to be lighter, but then white people go out and get tan.
Right?
They want to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody's happy with themselves. What's going on? Right? But you're right. Is that, oh, how much can you spend in the sun, right? Absolutely. That is ironic. And painful for that one little girl. The bleaching creams at 8 years old. Other thoughts? So experiences and cultural background do play a huge role in how and why we all think and act the way we do. So I know a lot today has been about your own self, about your own personal culture, digging down deep, but when we think about part of our acceptance to other people is also we have to be aware of what their cultural experiences mean to them. And the only way to do that is to really get to know them. And to have them allow time for them to share stories, allow time to meet on their turf, so they feel comfortable, they feel confident. We continually try to learn about different cultures in Rochester, and the easiest way we found to do that is to go to people's homes. And it is hard and it is a challenge, but the nuances that you learn from there, I didn't realize that when I go to a Somali home, why did they keep offering me all this food? And they seem to take taken aback when I would say, no thanks, I'm fine, I'm fine. Well, in their culture, they want to make sure that when you're in their home, you have everything you need. That they show you where the bathroom is, they have food, they have water, and that's their job, is to provide you for your comfort. So in order to be, it was suggested to me then, in order to be respectful in their home, if I wanted to decline food, I should at least bring my own water bottle. So they see that I have something that I need while I'm there visiting, in case I were to need a drink. So I'm like, well, who would have known that? I didn't know that. But I think about how many years have I gone on visits and been offended. My whole entire purpose is to build relationships, and then by declining, I'm kind of offending them. So, but again, I would have never known that if I didn't have a relationship to say, you know what, I'm sorry that is there something else I should do when I walk into your home? And she said, well, technically, you're supposed to just accept it unless you bring your own water bottle. And I'm like, okay, got you. But again, that kind of relationship takes time. And if it's not you who's building that relationship, then seek out the person that does have that relationship with your family. Oftentimes within different cultures, I think one of the scrolls that came up was that the Latino culture is growing in this area. So is there a cultural spokesperson? Is there that one parent or that one person? Oftentimes it might be a religious leader within the culture that tends to be a spokesperson for that community. And is that the person that would be your contact person for understanding some of those cultural differences and cultural nuances that could help you build relationships even stronger with people from different cultures? All right, so as we finish today, we kind of did a little bit of, started this journey of self-reflection, defined race, ethnicity, and culture, brought awareness to cultural sensitivity, talked a little bit about our own personal biases, and then shared a little bit. So this, again, it's a journey. It takes time. Keep revisiting that, coming back to it, recognizing that in others. Do watch for an emailing bell from SSC. Make sure you signed in. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from Dr. Holly about cultural sensitivity. It may be your first thought about others, about things, about behaviors, but just don't let it be your last thought. Thank you. However you want to do it,
Okay.
however your system works. Okay.
So we have a little snafu here as far as the CEUs, because Southeast Service Cooperative was offering CEUs this afternoon or today for this presentation. So I will just put out an email list on the counter, in the office counter, and you can initialize if you were here today, and then we'll give that to Carrie, and then she will take care of getting that information to you. One of the things, though, I want to invite you to do today is, for those people that are on the staff development committee, if you would raise your hand, please. Staff development, so people can see, look around the room. Okay, the reason I'm asking you to recognize who those individuals are on your staff is that I rely on them to give us feedback on the direction that we need to go. Obviously, Angie scratched the surface today, so is this something next year that you would like to delve a little bit deeper into? Would you like a little bit of follow-up with Love and Lodging? Would you like to do a book study? Is there a core group that wants to say, you know what, I understand that, or no, we've had our fill of it? So feel free to share that information with our staff development, or you can send it to me or to the building principals, or Shannon is our head person, lead person with the staff development. So feel free to share those things that you feel would be of value to you, so as a staff we can move forward with those things. So on that note, thank you, Angie. Appreciate having you with us today. It's a pleasure. Mr. Tim, any announcements for this afternoon? Anything? Mrs. Olsted Shepherd, anything? Okay, so on that note then, our PA is going to be meeting next in here. Do you want to take a short break?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you. Have a good
Here. Did you have extras?
Yeah, sure.
Is that all you have?
As always, Jenny.
I need that. I did 50.
Just so you know, I like rock my little